Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Celestine, the Living Saint, a mono-white Reanimator deck. This deck comes to us from Steven, who says they're looking for help with consistency and just a general fine-tuning. And in terms of restrictions, they are trying to keep the cards under $20, not strict, but hard to justify financially. Absolutely, we can work with that for sure. I like keeping this hobby as cheap as possible, even though we end up spending a lot of money on it. I was just at a weekend tournament where I did a modern, super qualifier, and I top 8'd, which was a lot of fun. And I know how much cost it is to get to these tournaments, to build these decks. We like keeping things cheap around here because goodness knows we have mortgages and the like. All right, with that in mind, let's take a look at Celestine and see what we can do to improve the deck. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Celestine the Living Saint, and why are they our mono-white Reanimator commander? Celestine is a 5-mana flying lifelink 3/4 human warrior from Warhammer 40k. I almost said Warcraft. This is a part of the human faction who are terrible, terrible people, is my understanding. And so they have one ability, very relevant to the card, one ability that says at the beginning of your end step, return target creature with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you've gained this turn. Very straightforward, life gain reanimation commander. I like that she herself gains life through attacking, she has evasion, and her ability triggers on the end of turn. So though it's not an ETB, and it is regular, it happens very quickly after you cast her. Very, very big fan. Looking at a deck that's around her, we can clearly see that Steven's done a very good job building this deck and going towards the theme of reanimating big and powerful creatures and having a whole life gain kind of side strategy or main strategy at the same time, like they're simultaneous. Very, very good. I very much like it. Like many Reanimator decks, our curve tends to trail off a little bit, which I think is normal. Our highest cost cards are Vanquish the Horde, which is actually much lower than 8 mana, much like Blasphemous Act. But Moonshaker Cavalry and Elish Norn are the top of our curves, which I think is a pair of very strong curve enders in a Reanimation deck. Otherwise, we have a few creatures that kind of trickle out from 5 mana and beyond, and I think they are a very good collection of creatures that often work in tandem with both the strategy of life gain and reanimation. However, we're here to talk about what can be improved. So there's a few directions or aspects that I immediately want to bring attention to, and as always, the first thing is the land count. We have 34 lands. We do have Mana Rocks with Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Liquid Metal Torque, Pearl Medallion to an aspect, and Pristine Talisman that help us gain mana, but overall we are very much so a non-ramping deck. And if we do the little thing here by putting this to 5, seeing our 5 drops, and we see this little line of text that says you have a 40, I'm going to round up to be nice, a 40% chance of playing these on curve. That is pretty scary because that means you only have a 40% chance to play your commander on curve. Now, this isn't a deck that necessarily always wants to play their commander on curve, but considering the large amount of cards that are 5 mana and above, which here I would say at least is 10 to 11 cards, 10% of the deck is kind of locked behind what we would say, 39%, and then only a 56% at 4 mana, and so on and so forth. I would really like this to go up to 37 lands. We are a reanimation deck. We have big things to drop. We need to have plans to drop those cards and to ensure we hit our, mana drops. So, or our, mana drops. Yeah, land drops. I'm doing great. These cards I think are generally good, but just adding a few more basics, some more snow-covered plains can't hurt, allow us to hit more of our land drops. Looking forward, and in other places, there are a few cards that I noticed that just aren't as strong as the others. that I would kind of want to think about. So let's kind of go backwards. I want to start with the artifacts. And in our artifacts, I noticed we have, first of all, some 3 mana kind of mana rocks or enablers. So looking at Oketra's, let's click you, Oketra's Monument, that reduces the mana cost of our white creature spells, and creating an extra creature spell when we cast one, extra creature. Pristine Talisman, that is both a mana rock and life gain, and Staff of the Sun Magus, which is whenever we cast a white spell or a plains enters, will gain a life. And I think those are the ones I want to focus on. These cards, I think, are just not good enough for what they do. Oketra's Monument is interesting because it kind of doesn't work with the deck either way you cut it. Like, the white creature spells you cast cost 1 less is really kind of cool because it reduces the cost of some of our creatures, but the primary way we want to play our big creatures is by reanimating them by our commander. Therefore, there's going to be scenarios where this line of text doesn't actually affect the creature that enters the battlefield. Likewise, in the same way, this only triggers on cast, so if we are reanimating those creatures, we won't even get the 1/1 tokens. And with that in line, I don't really like this. I think it's too much mana. The mana reduction is fine. We'll take a second, actually, we'll talk about this. So white creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And likewise down here we have Pearl Medallion. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, this is a type of card or an ability that I personally don't tend to like outside of very, very specific strategies. And those strategies, I think, are very much so if you are able to cast multiple spells a turn, then yes, they're good. If you are using Pearl Medallion, you have a Pearl Medallion, and you cast 1 spell a turn, and that spell happens to be white, this is just basically a Felwar Stone, right? Because not only does it's not even like Arcane Signet, because it doesn't generate white mana, it reduces colorless mana. So it's like, did I say Felwar Stone? I mean, like, it's Felwar. Let's think of a quick one. Mind Stone. Mind Stone's the one I'm thinking of. Mind Stone, where it only generates colorless mana, except you can't sack this to draw a card, but you get the point. This only removes a colorless mana if you only cast 1 spell a turn. This isn't even accounting for the fact that almost a 5th of our deck is non-white spells. They are artifacts. And with that in mind, we've got basically, and if we cut another third, I don't want to do the math. We've got basically 40 cards, actually, 48 cards, maybe 49 that can be reduced. My goodness, there's a few artifacts here. I'm not going to do the whole math, but not every card is going to be reduced by that. Also, the problem with Pearl Medallion, and also because this ability is to an extent on Oketra's Monument, white is the color that kind of doesn't benefit from this, like, the most, right? Blue, obviously, blue, black, and red, or blue, black and red, I think benefit the most, because not only are they in the colors of card draw or impulse draw, where you want to cast as many cards as you can in a turn, they have that mana, either mana generation or more options to kind of like cycle through a bunch of spells or cast a bunch of spells. These are the colors of Spellslinger decks. So they will make the most of these spells. Whereas white not only has no access to good ramp in its color, like our ramp here is in colorless, it also just doesn't have card draw at a very high level, right? So these cards are just not gonna do a lot here. If you are casting 1 spell a turn, like I said, this might as well be Mind Stone. Moving forward, Pristine Talisman and Staff of the Sun Magus, both are just too weak for what they do in terms of their mana cost. Pristine Talisman is a cute card that I do like, but it doesn't gain us enough mana for me to care that it's in here, right? If this said I said mana, sorry, I meant life. Though, to be fair, it is mana too. This neither gives me enough mana for 3 mana. I'd rather be gaining like 2 or more mana if I'm investing 3 mana into something. And if it's a life gain thing, I'd rather be caring about gaining 3 to 4 life than 1 at a time. Something I've talked about before in life gain decks is that there's two kind of mentalities. There are life gain decks that want quantity of life gain, as in how many times you gain life, or quality of life gain, which is the amount of life you gained over how many packets it comes into, if that makes sense. Something like both of these cards are low in quality, they're low amounts of life, but they're high in quantity because both both Pristine Talisman and Staff of the Sun Magus can be triggered easily every turn, maybe even twice with Staff of the Sun Magus or more. Likewise, like we compare this something to like Soul's Attendant, which can trigger several times really, really easily off of creatures, entering the battlefield. And I like that. I generally like more quantity over quality because it triggers very interesting cards. However, our commander does not work like that, right? Our commander does not have a on life gain trigger. Our commander has a quality life gain trigger at the end of turn. So you want to gain 3 to 4 life at least so that you can reanimate a creature that is 3 to 4 life or less. Even more so, the goal is obviously to hit 7 so you can reanimate cards like Elish Norn, Moonshaker Cavalry, or any other card in your deck, right? So, or in your graveyard, I should say. So these cards both not giving, like Staff of the Sun Magus not giving you that much life, Pristine Talisman not giving you that much mana or life, make me very disinterested in them, and I would like to cut them. Okay, that's a lot of time I've spent on those cards. I think we also have, I'm going to spend a little more time in our artifacts. There are a few cards here that kind of catch me a little off guard. Stronic Resonator and Lithiform Engine here. So they feel, how do I put this? I don't want to say they feel win more, but they feel close, right? In order for these cards to be good, we have that set up, right? What is the trigger we want to copy? It's going to be a reanimation trigger from our commander, right? Those are the best triggers that we have. We have a few ETB or sack effects that are really good, but generally the reanimation trigger is the one we want to copy. Now this is a triggered ability, so we can't use it off of any other reanimation spell, which let's see if we have any others that we should really be thinking about, and we really don't. Most of our reanimations are off of triggers, so I don't mind that as much, so it does fit. But it's still really specific. This either needs to be good, like for this to be good, you need your commander out, you need to gain life, you need to have a creature in the graveyard, and then you need 2 additional mana to copy it. Or you need this out and you need, where I saw you, Sun Titan out to get another Sun Titan trigger, which means you need at least 2 cards in your graveyard to reanimate. That's a lot of hoops to jump through. Whereas in both situations, either Sun Titan or your commander are good enough by themselves that I really don't think you need Strionic Resonator to make them better. This also goes for Lithiform Engine, though Lithiform Engine has the benefit of being able to copy more things. Granted, you need to control the thing you copy. You cannot copy your opponent's stuff, but being able to create copies of certain creatures, being able to copy the triggers is good. But it's a 4 mana artifact that requires another 2 mana minimum to do something, and because of how the cheapest one at 2 mana works, you actually need something else to be happening, which is, you see where we're going with this, right? I am really not so much a fan of these cards, and I really, really like to cut them. Yeah, I'm just not too much into them. Finally, Trading Post I think is a little too much mana for the main thing we want. I'm going to mainly focus on ways to get your cards into the graveyard, which is something we'll talk about right as we're going into additions. So I think I'm going to give you better options than this, so it'll be easy to cut. Looking at our creatures, I think I'm generally, I did suggest this, I'll have to cut that off the list. But I generally do like a lot of your creatures. We have a nice collection of good creatures, life gain, fun cards that just work with life gain, and I do generally like it. I think Rock's Faithmender is one of those doubling effects that I don't think I'm too interested in. However, I don't think it's the worst thing. It combos very well with cards such as Well of Lost Dreams or Aetherflux Reservoir. I'm not going to be too mad about it, so I think it's fine to use. And the rest of the creatures are pretty impressive. Yeah. I think if you really wanted to, we could make some cuts here and there of certain creatures that we could improve on. And there's just not a lot. Like Linden, the Steadfast Queen, I think is a little weaker than everything else. The Crested Sunmare, I get why it's here, but it just creates a 5/5 every turn. I don't know to what degree I love that. Same thing with Wingmate Rock, but I'm really pushing to cut these cards. I think they're generally fine, and I'm more interested, and here we'll do our transition to my additions. The thing that I see in a lot of mono-white reanimations that we really need to work with is the ability to put our cards in our graveyard. As players might know, reanimation requires, the right cards in the graveyard, and both discard and mill is the traditional way, if not tutoring or entombing, is the way we put those cards into the graveyard. We don't want to rely on creatures dying most of the time, because especially on the higher tier or higher curve of our creatures like Elesh Norn, it means we had to have casted them, right? We had to cast Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. She has to then, I'll just do this for people who have not seen this card, though I love the Phyrexian text. You need to have cast this bomb of a creature, right? And then she has to have died. This is very specific because if she is bounced, if she is exiled, if she is shuffled into your deck, you cannot reanimate her, and that's kind of a big loss. And so with that in mind, I am much more, I really like the ability to put our own creatures in our graveyards to ensure they have there, or I like these creatures that can sacrifice themselves so you can keep using their effects over and over. So with that in mind, let's look into the additions I would like to put in. So let's talk about Mill first. Milliken is an incredibly boring feeling card. I'm not gonna lie, it's not an impressive card. It does very little. It's just like a percentage point card, but I think it's worthwhile. If you would take out one of the artifacts that I didn't like, this is a mana dork. It's a 0/1. It's worth bringing back from the dead sometimes. It will just give you a constant little mill turn after turn, and if you're lucky, you will get cards that you want in the graveyard. You don't have a lot of control over it, but it's a fine, decent addition. After that, Perpetual Timepiece feels a lot better. I like this as a 2 mana, immediately mill 2, and then every part of every turn cycle, you're milling yourself 2 more. It will add up on a longer game. It's not a great draw mid-game, but I will say its ability to exile itself and save, quote-unquote, creatures from your graveyard back into your deck both works against like exile effects, but also works really well if you have all of your good pieces are in the graveyard, and reanimating them doesn't seem to be possible. Perpetual Timepiece can take some of them back. And it's your choice of how many, which is really nice. And so I like that. You can leave all the lands in and put all of the gas back in. Going into discard, this is a section that I think is a little more important because discard allows more selection, albeit for the fact that it has to be in your hand. Collector's Vault is kind of the main one I really like because it does everything we kind of want. You loot, so you immediately draw an extra card so you have a higher selection to discard from. You discard, and then you create a treasure token, which makes this only kind of 1 mana to use the ability because you get 1 mana back. If you don't use that mana in that turn, you have quote-unquote ramped yourself next turn, which is also something I really, really like. I think this is a very, very strong card that I think is an easy inclusion here. Another one that I really like in these kind of cards is Key to the City. This is a great card because not only does it allow, your discard to be happening, you discard, and gives you additionally card draw by paying 2 to kind of buy back that card you discarded. Its discard effect is actually really, really relevant, especially in reanimation decks. This card lets your creatures get in, specifically your reanimated creatures, the ones that you really want to get in, a Wormcoil Engine or a Sun Titan that you want to be able to attack with and not immediately lose. Now there is something to be said that you sometimes do want them to block and kill these creatures so that you can reanimate them, but even then I will point out that this just has a lot of utility for a card that you can actually just ignore this line of text and use it for everything else. So this is something I really, really like. I will also note that this is not just your creatures, so you can use this offensively or politically with your opponent's creatures, which is really, really nice. Mask of Memory is one that I really do like. I think I'd like to go more into equipment, because you are in white and equipment is very, very good in white to use this card, but it is by itself a very, very strong card. 2 to play, 1 to equip, draw 2, discard 1 on hit is just very, very strong. Obviously combos very nicely with Key to the City with unblockability, but is very, very strong otherwise. The fact that this puts you ahead on cards even with the loot is also really, really nice. And the fact that our commander already has evasion naturally means this build will hit pretty often and puts you ahead very, very easily. So I do really like this. Obviously, if you can put this on a creature with double strike, which we don't have, but if we did, this would be even better. Going into one more kind of discard card, kind of leading into some creatures I would like to play, is Devout Witness. Devout Witness is really interesting because it plays close to both a card you already have and a card that I'll suggest, where it is a naturalize or disenchant ability tied into what we want to do with a creature. So Devout Witness discards a card to, turn that card into disenchant. The way Spell Shapers work, for players who do not know, Spell Shapers themselves, they create known magic cards by discarding cards. So basically transforming the card you discard into the spell you want. And this spell is Disenchant for 1 and a white. It's at instant speed, it's very strong, you will never run out of targets, I almost guarantee it, in a 4-player game with 3 opponents to disenchant cards. And it discards cards so that you can reanimate it. I think this is a really, really nice card. I will note that it is a 2/2 for 3, which isn't a great play, but for what it's worth, it is a pretty good investment. Looking at creatures that are spells themselves, we are looking at the sacrifice creatures. Kami of the False Hope is a card I really, really like. One of the things I wanted to point out is it's a lot easier for you to get back 1 mana creatures than it is 7 mana creatures, so having a few more 1 mana creatures could be good. I'm not going to suggest, I think, any more than this one, but I wanted to start somewhere. Kami of the False Hope is just a very, very powerful spirit who is themselves a fog, and if you can reuse this card, you're going to have an absolutely good time. If you ever played with the Fog Frog, which is the exact same card but in green, with a reanimation commander such as Marin, you know the power of reanimating a fog every turn. This puts a lot of pressure, takes a lot of pressure off of you and puts pressure on your opponents because they're going to start attacking each other over you because it's just not worth their investment to attack when you can burn the fog and just guarantee getting it back very, very easily. Very good card, very much so. I suggest it in a lot of decks, especially at this power level. Cathar Commando is very much like the other sacrifice to destroy target artifact or enchantment creature that you have. However, this has flash and costs 1 to do so and can be done at instant speed. I think that trade-off is pretty good, though you can easily play both. This also works as, what were they called? Rattlesnakes? I'm not sure. Flash creatures that you can throw in to block. At 3 power, this blocks and trades with a lot of relevant creatures. So right when your opponents think you're a free attack, this is really nice to use as a removal spell. And then later, reanimate. Likewise, as mentioned before, you can use this to just naturalize or disenchant your opponent's creatures, albeit for 1 more mana, so a 3 mana instant speed, destroy target artifact or enchantment, but is still very, very good and I think worth playing. Not even including the fact that this is a very reasonable turn 2 flash in that you can attack with on the start of your 3rd turn if one of your opponents only has their commander out with less than 3 power or has no relevant creatures or not able to block. And I kind of like that. Moving on, we have Dauntless Dismantler. This is another sacrifice trigger, which is very, very strong. This one is a little trickier because it is going to destroy your own artifacts, which are kind of relevant to your board plan, but there's going to be situations you still want this creature. If you're going to play very much so with this creature, I would recommend maybe not going towards the equipment side and limiting the amount of artifacts that you have. However, don't forget you do have cards such as Sun Titan and other cards you could be playing to reanimate those artifacts, which can be fun in and of itself. This is just a generally really strong card. You could even just ignore this text for most of its lifetime and just kind of take advantage of its static ability and its 1/4 nature to block and slow down your opponents. Bounty Agent's already in the deck. I'm not going to talk about it. I didn't see it. Great card. Glad you're playing. The last card I wanted to talk about was Fanatical Devotion. This is a card that I think is very, very funny, very, very interesting, and just not the kind of card you see often. Like this text right here, you do not see often in white. We are playing cards like Ashnod's Altar and Altar of Dementia just for this text, though Altar of Dementia and Ashnod's Altar obviously do a lot for the deck. The fact that you can sacrifice at instant speed is a very, very big thing. This is the ability to sacrifice Solemn Simulacrum and immediately get it back, to sacrifice any other ETB creature and get it back, to avoid exile-based board clears such as Farewell or exile such as Swords to Plowshares to get that card back. Not only that, is you can use this to survive board clears in general or to survive combat or other tricks. This is just a very, very strong card that I think you'll be very, very happy to play with and have around as a white sacrifice effect. And that's generally all my additions. I think this is a pretty good deck. I like where it is. I like where it's going. If we talk about this deck again in the future, the next thing I'd like to talk about most likely is power level and where we want it to go. I think we could definitely play this deck with more board clears, for example, or more control aspects, because we kind of do have the room for it. Celestine can be played rather controlly, as her ability to reanimate creatures can be defensive and offensive in the way that we can just keep, wiping the board and reanimating our creatures, or we can keep reusing sacrifice or ETB effects. She represents a lot and honestly works both as the commander or in the 99 if you ever chose to change the deck's kind of construction. Overall though, very, very happy with it. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I hope that you will send this deck in again, because I am really interested to see where it's going. Celestine is a lot of fun, and I love mono white, I love Reanimator. What a awesome combination. All right, thank you so much, Steven. Good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there is a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.